right, welcome to the Stier Youth Ministry podcast. I believe in the power of the gospel and the potential of teens, and I also believe that the best way to get teens to grow is to get them to go. And I want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, to rate it, review it, to spread the word to youth leaders that it's time for a revolution in youth ministry that will result in every teen everywhere hearing the gospel from a friend. And today I'm super excited because we have a good friend on with me, Doug Holliday. He's a 30-year plus veteran of youth ministry. He served on local church staff in 3 different states. He's currently the president of Sonlife, has also served on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ, now known as Cru. And he's a speaker and a trainer with Dare to Share. We've been working together for many, many years. In addition, he's the president of Open Door Haiti, has launched youth leader training opportunities in Haiti and throughout Africa. Doug and his wife Jennifer live in Lake Mary, Florida. They have 6 daughters, Marisa, Jacqueline, Emma, Edleen, Mary Faith, and Edith. And super, super excited to have Doug with us here today. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Greg, it's great to be on the podcast with you. This is fun.
Yeah, and we've known each other for a long, long time. Just think back, what you kind of contemplate back us first meeting. Where was it? What was your impression?
Yeah, I was the Southeast Regional coordinator for Sonlife back in the early 2000s, and there was youth specialty conference in Tampa. And so I was there repping Sonlife, standing at a table, passing out whatever to try and lure in unsuspecting youth pastors. But looking for what are some of those breakouts, the tracks that might, spark some interest, fit with a passion of mine. And for a long time, deep passion for evangelism, sharing the gospel, sharing with students. And so I saw that there was this breakout called Outbreak. And I was like, all right, well, gonna check this out. And I think there was 2 different sessions, and I connected with you in between the sessions and introduced myself, and you had heard of Sonlife and knew some of the things that Sonlife was doing, and I said, well, Sonlife and Dare to Share, we should find some way to work together. I mean, this could work. And at that point, as a regional coordinator, I didn't have a lot of power to make those things happen. I could just make recommendations, suggestions, but who would have imagined that a dozen years later, I would be in the position, sitting in this seat, where we would be able to make a partnership like that happen. So yeah, but I just remember, what was the movie Outbreak, and you had written a book on Outbreak and kind of the gospel growing virally as students are reaching students and being disciples who are making disciples and reaching more students, and just the spread of the gospel among this generation. And to use the Jerry Maguire line, you had me at hello, right? It's like,
that's right.
I'm all in.
And I felt the same way about you. I remember us talking about the gospel, and I was like, man, I'd love a partnership with these guys. I got to make sure they're clear on the gospel, and you were, and it was just like instantaneous, unity and synergy. It took a while because, I think you had really worked hard on getting a meeting with me and Dan Spader, who, started Sonlife. And that first meeting, I remember It didn't go super well. It was like West Side Story a little bit, because, Dan was talking about the model of Jesus, and I was kind of talking about Paul, and it was like, like we're in a West Side Story movie. It was like battling against each other a little bit. But, over the years, I think Sonlife has had a deep impact on Dare to Share and on me personally, and how I've thought about disciple multiplication, And it's been really great, like just working together, figuring stuff out. I know one of the big impacts it's had, and we'll talk about the disciple multiplication strategy in a minute, but one of the big impacts it's had on us was the whole global vision. And I remember when
Yeah.
you invited Debbie Brasina and myself to join you guys at Global Youth Initiative. I think it's called Concentric now.
now. Yeah.
But Israel and just that journey. Just tell everybody a little bit about what happened is 7 years ago in Israel. Just that,
Yeah.
what did you do? What was the purpose of it? Who did you invite? And how did it impact everybody?
Yeah, I remember you and I, each of us flying there directly from, I think it was a St. Louis tour event, Dare to Share tour
Yep.
event. And because we were there, we ended up missing the first half day of that I think 10-day conference in Israel, and kind of there were leaders from 53 different countries, almost 200 people gathered there in Israel, looking at Jesus. Jesus is our model, and how the bold moves that Jesus made to create a movement that would change the world. And looked at 5 specific bold moves. And I remember we were up on Mount Arbel and listening to some teaching from Bill Hodgson, who at the time was the national director for Crew in Australia. And as Bill was talking about the Great Commission and going everywhere, and just looking out kind of in all directions from Mount Arbel, in a location where Jesus likely gave the Great Commission to go into all the world, to make disciples of all nations. And I know at that point, Dare to Share was specifically focused on the U.S., and resources and energies pointed in that direction. But I remember you pulled Debbie and I together in the midst of that up there on Mount Arbel, and just felt like, I think our bold move for Dare to Share is going everywhere. That it's not just about the U.S., but that it would be not every teen in the U.S., but every teen everywhere, equipped to share the gospel with their friend, and to hear the gospel from a friend. And we put our hands in a pile and we prayed, consecrated that moment, and okay, let's do this. Let's figure out how we, in partnership together, Sonlife and Dare to Share, can be a part of a movement that's going to bring the gospel to teens across the globe.
Yeah, and it's been great. I still have that picture under key moments in my phone. And that's the first thing that pops up is, our 3 hands just in the middle saying we're in this together. And man, the Lord has opened up some amazing, amazing doors. So I'm very grateful to Sonlife personally for your friendship. You're a guy we talk every week to try to keep each other accountable, pray for each other, encourage each other. And I talk about having somebody who's on your red phone, like the old Batman. You can always get Batman through the red phone, right? That you and Zane Black, Dave Gibson are 3 guys in my life that keep me accountable, and whom I'm able to keep accountable as well. And I appreciate iron sharpening iron, man. So it's been great.
sure.
And then not only the impact on me, but the impact on the ministry, and how that trip really opened up for us to grow globally and work together with evangelism and discipleship. We'll talk about that in a minute, but tell us about Sonlife. I mean, Sonlife has been around a long time, and recently Sonlife went through a narrowing of focus, which I'm super excited about, but I don't want to give away the story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Sonlife?
Yeah, my first introduction to Sonlife was late 80s, as a new youth pastor, had graduated from Bible college and was planning to be a church planter, and kind of backed my way into youth ministry, because I was going to get my feet wet and kind of learn the ropes. And about a year in, I'm thinking, well, I'll just do youth ministry until I can be a real pastor. And then realizing, you know what, this is as real as ministry gets, because this is the age when people are making decisions for Christ. 85% are going to make that decision to trust Christ before they walk across the platform for a high school graduation. And so I had been through youth ministry classes or whatever in Bible college at Liberty University. But I remember being invited to a Sonlife training at Moody Bible Institute, and went and just, my eyes were opened, because it wasn't necessarily anything groundbreaking or new, as much as it just gave me the tracks to run on, in terms of figuring out what ministry would look like. And yes, the goal is to make disciples, but how do we get there? What are the tracks we're going to run on to see that happen? What's that pathway? And just laid out real clearly from the Son's life, from the model that Jesus has given us with his own disciples, how to do that. And at that point, Sonlife was about 10 years old. It had started in the late 70s as the youth ministry division of Moody in Chicago. And then probably early 90s, it broke off and went independent from Moody as its own organization. But Sonlife in those early days, its primary focus was youth ministry, disciple-making youth ministries. Probably the mid 80s, started an event for high school students, bringing them into the city of Chicago, and very much like Lead the Cause with Dare to Share, training them in evangelism and apologetics in the morning, sending them out on the street in the afternoon to share their faith, coming together in the evening to celebrate the stories of what had happened that day. And just incredible numbers of students whose lives had been impacted by that. But, as Sonlife continued to grow through the years, a lot of those initial youth pastors ended up becoming senior pastors or discipleship pastors or executive pastors. And they wanted to bring Sonlife to their whole church. And so Sonlife made a pivot there in the mid 90s and started to offer their disciple-making training still to youth ministry, but then started a division focused on the church. And that continued to grow and develop. When I stepped in as the executive director, the president of Sonlife in 2013, we had that full spectrum of ministry, the whole church that we were focused on. But just over a year ago now, actually at Lead the Cause there in Denver, and it was on the last night up in the mountains, and just this incredible night. And I know you remember it, but you and Zane and Gerard all speaking, and everything orchestrated and planned, but it was like the students took over the night. From the testimonies that they shared. One of the girls who was on the worship team, the prayer that she prayed, it was like Holy Spirit anointed, fire coming from heaven prayer as she prayed over her peers to share the gospel. And then the student from one of the youth groups who came up at the very end as you were dismissing everyone, and she basically ripped the mic out of your hand and said, "Hey, when our youth group ends anything we do, we end like this, and can we do this?" And I was like, what is going on here? This is crazy. And I just came away from that and like this deep sense in my heart that we've got to double down on this generation, double down on youth ministry. And I came back from that, and a year ago on our Sonlife team retreat in the fall, I shared with the team that we were returning to Sonlife's roots, that youth ministry would once again be our primary focus. where we've got relationships with churches, with senior pastors, those relationships will continue. But as we're strategizing, as we're praying, as we're dreaming about where we're going as a ministry and advancing our mission of equipping leaders in relational disciple making, we're thinking about it through the lens of youth ministry. And how do we raise up this next generation? And we're so excited about the potential of what we see God doing with youth pastors in youth ministry. It can be easy as leaders like we are to be discouraged or to lose hope. I mean, so many Christian colleges, their youth ministry programs are they're being downgraded, cutting staff, cutting programs, eliminating youth ministry degrees, whatever. But more than ever, this generation is hungry for hope. They don't realize it, but they're hungry for the gospel. And we need to equip a generation of leaders who are passionate and equipped to reach them. And so
Amen.
I'm all in, man. Just like 7 years ago there on Mount Arbel when we put our hands in the pile together for global.
Yep.
I'm putting my hand in the pile with you for this generation and for youth ministry. Let's do it.
Yeah, amen. And I remember when you sent Debbie and I kind of a long email explaining, kind of your turn back toward youth ministry. And Deb sent you a nice long email, and I just sent you 2 words, welcome back. And I was so happy because this is a big job, and there's no way one ministry can do it alone. And, we work together. Evangelism and disciple multiplication is like nitrogen and glycerin. So let's talk a little bit about that relationship in just a moment. But first of all, I think it'd be good for those who are listening who are not familiar with the discipleship strategy from Sonlife, which is actually from Jesus. I mean, it's just rooted in the Gospels. Could you quickly just explain that discipleship strategy?
Yeah. So, just looking through the Gospels and, starting with the end in mind, right? So Matthew 28, Jesus commissions them. Acts 1, the church is birthed, it's launched. How do you get there? You go back to the beginning of Jesus' ministry and look over a 3.5-year ministry. What did Jesus do year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 to see the results that he saw to create a movement of multiplication?
Which just, by the way, let me just interrupt. It's almost like from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade to 12th grade. So you could overlay this, in a sense, over the high school years of the typical teenager.
And particularly when you consider the fact that most of Jesus' initial disciples were teenagers. And we could get into some evidences for that, but suffice to say, Jesus choosing teenagers as the ones he would invest in, unschooled, ordinary men, these young guys that he's going to change the world with. So what did that look like? And so we kind of got what we call the 4-chair discipling process. And so that initial chair 1, what did Jesus do there? He was reaching them when they were not yet believers. They didn't yet know that he was the Messiah. And so he was inviting them to come and see who I am, so that you can place your faith in me, that you can believe in me. And so it begins with those who are spiritually lost, and then bringing them to the place, chair 2, where they become a believer, where they've put their faith in him. And the invitation then in that second chair is to follow me. Begin to pattern your life after me. Journey with me, walk with me, learn from me. My character, my priorities, let them be your character and your priorities. To the place then where they would see who Jesus was, the way that he was ministering, the way that he was interacting with people. And if they were going to be like him, it meant that they were going to have to minister the way that he ministered as well. And so that third chair is where they become workers. And now they are going to be equipped to fish for people. So that's that third invitation. Follow me and I will make you fishers of people. And so Jesus is beginning to equip them how to fish for the spiritually lost. And then when those spiritually lost put their faith in him, how to help them continue to journey and follow. So focusing that chair 3, the worker chair, focusing on the lost in chair 1 and the believer in chair 2. And then, just before he goes to the cross, John 15, Jesus says, here's my desire for you, that you would bear much fruit that will last. And so it's this idea of living a fruit-bearing life. And from a disciple-making standpoint, we bear fruit when we reach others and see them become disciples as well. And they reach others, helping them to become disciples as well, who reach others, helping them to become disciples as well. And so you've got this multiplication effect. Mm-hmm. And so that fourth chair is the chair of the disciple maker. And that's the goal all along, that they would become disciple makers. But he's going to take them on a process to get there. And honestly, we don't even really like the word discipleship, because it has a connotation with it that you have two separate things. You have evangelism and you have discipleship. And when we look at Jesus' model, those two things are intricately linked together.
Yes.
Biblical
Matter of fact,
discipleship begins with
quote.
Evangelism.
There you go.
Biblical discipleship begins with evangelism and ends with evangelism, right?
That's right.
It begins by being reached and growing to the place where you are multiplying, where you are reaching others who will reach others who will reach others.
Yeah.
And so that was Jesus' intent from the beginning, but how did he get there? What was that process? So, and then as we train youth leaders, and this was the training that I received as a young youth pastor back in the late 80s that kind of gave me those tracks to run on. It's as a youth leader, what am I focused on? Well, first you're going to win the lost, then you're going to build the believer, then you're going to equip the worker, and then you're going to multiply disciple makers. And so following that pathway, what are the events, the programs, the emphasis that you have in each of those buckets that's going to help to advance your ministry toward multiplying disciple makers? And just transformative to look at the life of Jesus and how he did this.
It's all about Jesus. I love it. And I love the simple visual of 4 chairs, because what we have discovered is it's a simple way for youth leaders to evaluate which chair their students are in. Some of them just use an Excel spreadsheet. They list all their students. They put, who's in chair 1, chair 2, chair 3, chair 4. What's that next step to get them to the next chair? What's that next event, program, discipleship step? And it just gives us a process for that disciple multiplication. So,
and
with
a great
all this
way to
in mind,
evaluate your students, but also to evaluate your programs and to say, all right, we're doing this. Who's the primary target of this? Is it? We've got this upcoming fall retreat. Who's the primary target? Is it chair 1? Is it chair 2? Is it who is it? And let's design everything to be really effective at accomplishing that.
I love that. So just based on your experience, how would you think that the typical youth group in the United States, anyway, is doing when it comes to disciple multiplication?
We're not doing well, and I think we want to do well. It's not for a lack of desire. I think if you talk to most youth pastors, youth leaders out there and said, "Do you want to make disciples?" They'd say, "Absolutely, yes."
Yep.
But it's the how. How do you get there? And so it's the lack of knowledge or lack of training or equipping. Years ago, Sun Life, we've done a study of youth ministries, and we found what we call the 87% problem. That for the ministries that we evaluated, 87% of them, 100% of their programming was geared toward Chair 2 students. So how are you going to make disciples who will make disciples if you don't have a balance across all 4 chairs? And I think probably a lot of youth ministries, maybe they're not all Chair 1. Probably a lot of them are all Chair 2. Probably a lot of them are Chair 1 and Chair 2. They're doing things to reach lost kids. But your typical youth ministry, when it comes to evangelism, it's going to be come to the youth group and hear the youth pastor share the gospel, and the youth pastor will lead you in a prayer to receive Christ. And everything from an evangelism standpoint, it's the youth pastor who's doing it.
Yeah.
And there's not an equipping of the students to reach their friends, to share the gospel with their friends. And so you end up having youth ministries where if you've got a really dynamic youth pastor who's an evangelist at heart, you're reaching kids for Christ, and maybe they're taking some initial steps in growing. But it's never advancing beyond that. So the ministry, it might look good on paper because there's lots of kids and growing in numbers, and they've got budgets, and they've got programs, and they've got, it's exciting stuff that's going on. And so, what are we evaluating when we evaluate success? How do we know that we're really successful from a youth ministry standpoint? And I think a lot of youth ministries, they're going to base it on their numbers, and are we growing in numbers, and are we keeping kids and parents happy? And so
I think this is really good, Doug. I think it also helps me understand kind of the role of Dare to Share has really been to get kids to Chair 3. And that's kind of what, Dare to Share Live, our curriculum, our summer events, really, how do you get to Chair 3? Of course, we want kids to get to Chair 4, but I think like ministries like Sun Life have more resources and tools to get students there all the way to Chair 4. And that's why it's a great partnership. Speaking of resources, so if a youth leader's listening to this right now and they're like, this really resonates with my soul, where do I start? What resources do you guys have at Sun Life that you could point them to right away that they could begin down this process of putting this disciple multiplication strategy in place in their youth group?
Yeah, so our team leads disciple making cohorts, and so if there's someone listening who wants to take some initial steps to figuring this out and beginning to implement, picking up a copy of the 4-chair discipling book or our training material on that, and jumping into a cohort with one of our team members, who then can not only provide some training with that, but also some coaching in terms of how do you actually implement that? What does this look like in your ministry? Because there's obviously great resources that you can pick up and read, but actually to be able to have a conversation with a person and explain your specific scenario, and to have them help you diagnose what's going on and what those next steps are is so valuable. So, I mean, we've got, in regards to four-chair discipling, we've got a four-chair inventory, a simple tool to be able to share with your ministry, your volunteers, your students, to help them identify exactly where they're at in that discipling process. We've got our 40 days of disciple making journal, which ties all of those things together, kind of in a format for students to engage, maybe in a small group context with Jesus, with his life, with his ministry, in that process of moving toward being a disciple who makes disciples. And built right into those 40 days, every day there's a discipling challenge for that student. Here's something to do today to put this into practice. And having two other friends who are going to be going through that with you, and you each sharing the spiritually lost friends who you're going to be praying for in that process, and getting together with the three of you and holding each other accountable to those relationships with spiritually lost friends and to those daily discipling challenges. So some simple tools, but really, I think the coaching is where the greatest impact is going to be felt for a youth leader, is actually having someone to talk to.
So if they just go to sonlife.com, they can get access to all of that. Is that right?
They can, yeah, and they can go on our team page there and find someone who might be near them, although a lot of our cohorts are on Zoom, so location doesn't necessarily matter. But if there is someone near you, then having them be on location, maybe coming to your youth group one evening, maybe bringing them in and they teach, but also they're able to see things and then meet with you and say, okay, so you did this and this and this, and let's talk about that. What are you looking to see happen? And just a fresh set of eyes. And so if there's someone who's near you, that's helpful.
That's great. Well, I really encourage every youth leader listening, as soon as you're done with this podcast, go to sonlife.com and go to that team page and order four-chair discipling, read it. It's kind of the primer on this, but lots of free resources on sonlife.com to help you with this process, and coaching, consulting, which is what we need. So Doug, we're not done, but I'm going to bring somebody into this conversation, an actual youth leader, one that we both know and love, Nathan Smith.
Yeah.
Nathan, his history includes being a pastor's kid. I love that he puts that on his bio. A church planner's kid, a landscape designer, and a student pastor at First Baptist Church in Roswell, New Mexico. His passion is training leaders to reach people for Jesus, as well as seeing students stick with their faith after high school. Since moving to Roswell and implementing gospel advancing values and the Sonlife strategy, he's seen God grow the group from 15 to 80 with at least 10 students each year putting their faith in Christ. Nathan has served in 2 churches, creating gospel advancing, disciple multiplying ministries for the past 18 years, along with his amazing wife, Kendra, and their 4 kids. Welcome, Nathan Smith.
Thanks. You guys have no idea.
Landscape designer.
Yes, sir. That's where my degree is in. That's where I started all this, was this Bivo guy, or this volunteer guy, actually, in youth ministry So as a youth pastor, I've done it from the volunteer side. I've done it from the full-time side. It's a lot of work. And I'm going to tell you guys, I am so incredibly humbled to be on a podcast with 2 of my spiritual heroes. Like, it's kind of ridiculous to think about this as just to be a part of this. And I appreciate this opportunity, guys. I really, really do.
Man,
go ahead.
We love you. We love you, Nathan. We love you. And I want to give you an opportunity to kind of comment or ask questions or things that kind of bubbled to the top as I was interviewing Doug, just to talk about, so that the youth leader listening or watching this can say, man, that's very helpful for me, or that's an insight I needed right now. So anything bubbled to the top as Doug was talking?
The first thing I remembered was when I met both of you, like, really got to know each other at a Lead the Cause event, the summer thing Dare to Share does, and Doug coming in with the Sonlife perspective. I was desperate. I needed help. And between the gospel advancing ministry training, I Dare to Share, and the 4-chair stuff with Sun Life, my kids walked away from that. My students walked away going, okay, I now know what my next step is. I am chair 2 or I am chair 3, and I want to be chair 4 by next year. They had no idea how much work that was going to take, and none of them actually succeeded getting to chair 4 in 9 months, but they understood, and it put practical language on this whole idea of, I want to go from being a baby believer to what it means to be a mature believer. And so I think that was the most inspiring part of that. And sitting in my office, I can't count how many times with students and adults that I've been able to say, okay, let's identify where you're at, and then let's identify the steps you need to take to get to where you want to go. And I mean, I know it's really easy for kids to burn out on evangelism, because if they're in love with evangelism, then it's not going to work. But when they fall in love with Jesus and see how that Jesus discipled and modeled it for his students, his youth group, his disciples, and then we get to see in the book of Acts how they took what they had been trained to do and they did it again, and how we can do the same thing. It's so exciting to me, and so appreciate being able to put words on it and put like common language for us not superly scholarly people, to say the least.
I think the simplicity of 4 chairs is its brilliance. And I don't know if you remember this, Nathan and Doug, you may remember this. We had our own disciple multiplication strategy for several years called Deep and Wide, right? It helps teens go deep as you help them go wide. And we were excited about it and had a paper on it and curriculum around it and all this stuff. But when I went through 4-chair discipling, I'm like, this is better. I think it's clearer. I think it's easier to understand and apply. And around that same time, Andy Stanley came out with the book Deep and Wide. We actually own the trademark on Deep and Wide. So we were able to let them use the trademark, and our default disciple multiplication strategy now is 4-chair. We just recommend youth leaders go to, sonlife.com and figure it out, because that's what you guys do, and you do it so well. So
well, and Doug, I noticed this time maybe more than I have, and I've been kind of struggling with this. But would you say, based on kind of what you said, that curriculum's great, but you would much prefer people to be a part of one-on-one with somebody else? Because I know you pushed on this podcast a whole lot more of getting involved in one of the cohorts than, say, reading a book. Is that super important? Is that what did I hear that correctly?
I think that's where the transformation really comes for most leaders. Some people are, they're able to figure things out on their own, pick up a book, read it, take it, implement it. And that's great. But for most of us, having a sounding board, someone to share thoughts, or something that we're wrestling through, or I'm not really able to figure this out, and have another perspective and someone on the outside. And then particularly from our Sun Life training standpoint, someone who has implemented it in a youth ministry context. Every person on our team has done that. They've cut their teeth on this, just like me all those years ago as a young youth pastor going through Sun Life training and finding the tracks to run on, and then beginning to run on those tracks and implement it and see fruit as a result. And so, these youth ministry coaches have implemented, they've hit the bumps in the road, they've come to the roadblocks, they've faced the different challenges. Maybe being in a scenario where you're trying to do this, and you've got leadership in your church who is putting up roadblocks in front of you because that's not the way we want things done, or we've never done it that way before, or whatever the roadblock might be. And how do you navigate through those challenges? So I think the coach is critical for most of us in terms of taking those next steps. And
just to jump in, Doug, I think as I think about Nathan, your question, and Doug, your answer, I think the gravitational pull of just going back to our default mode of traditional youth ministry is so strong that if we don't have personal accountability and encouragement, we just go back to default, which is traditional Western meeting-driven youth ministry. It's not disciple multiplication; it's more meetings. So I do think that is a very good insight, Doug, about the need for coaching and consulting and accountability.
Well, and I got to do one
and I
of
think
those cohorts.
even being in a cohort where you've got some other youth pastors who are trying to implement and wrestling through this, and you're hearing some of the things they're dealing with, and there's just that peer learning that goes on. But to your point, Greg, I think that there is a reality that if we've only seen it done one way, it's hard for us to envision how it could look different, and how it could be successful or impactful. And so I think having a coach helps to lift us above, to be able to see beyond what's right in front of us, to see what it can be.
Well, and it's cool because as somebody who's been coached by both Sun Life and Dare to Share, I've been a part of one of those cohorts and now out coaching others. It's fun to see the empowerment and the discipleship passion and the multiplication as being able to reach people in other areas of the country that there's not a lot of Dare to Share or Sun Life influence, and to be able to encourage others. To me, it's fun to be a part of that, and it's fun to be able to see God at work, and just this landscaper who gets to do youth ministry now, having the opportunity to be able to influence and encourage others for the gospel and to become gospel advancing with a heavy dose of discipleship, which I was one of those guys who came in going, I don't see how discipleship and evangelism are the same. And that quote of yours, I quote it all the time: discipleship begins and ends with evangelism. Like, I use that all the time, because if we're just educating Christians, we're not truly discipling, because that means we're not reproducing ourselves. And so I love that, and I appreciate that, and appreciate what Sun Life does for my ministry and for what's even happening here as a guy who's been doing this for a while now.
And it's encouraging. I can speak for Doug. I know that you're kind of the result of two ministries working together. And this is why I love the partnership with Sun Life. And this is why I'm so excited they got back into youth ministry, because as their primary focus, because you're a walking, talking, living, breathing example in your youth group of the impact of, evangelism and discipleship synergizing to make and multiply disciples. So you say, hey, I'm honored to be with you guys. We're honored to be with you, Nathan, because you're actually living it out. You're grinding it out in real life. And so we're very, very grateful for you and your ministry.
Well, it gets messy.
You're one of those guys who's taken the training, taken the equipping, and actually you're doing it. And yes, it's messy, but you're seeing fruit, and that is so exciting.
Well, it's fun when 50% of your students that are being discipled by other students. It freaks out church leadership, but it's exciting to see how that can happen, and it's exciting to see how that these kids own it at such a different level when they realize other students are counting on them to teach them what they've been taught. And so that, to me, is such a big deal, and so important that we continue to do that, awesome. Because that's where that chair 3 and those chair 4 believers, one, have somewhere that they're looking to achieve to get to, and it becomes, a permanent life change, as you hear from kids in college. And we've got kids all over the world who've walked through this strategy, from Chad, Africa to Fort Collins, Colorado. I mean, it's like all over the place. Awesome. Where there's just all these kids who say, oh, I get to own this and I get to do this, and I'm doing this because I've fallen in love with Jesus and he's amazing.
Well, and everybody's talking about, taking care of yourself and make sure, you don't burn out. I think one of the reasons youth leaders are burning out is they're trying to do all the discipleship themselves. And when you raise up disciple makers, actually it gives you margin. to be able to, get away and rest and pray and, entrust the work of the ministry to disciple makers, whether they're students or adults. Hey, we're wrapping up here. So I just want to finish with this. I want to give you and Doug an opportunity. If there's a youth leader that's listening to this and maybe they want to connect with you through social media or email, whatever your preferred method is of communication, how would youth leaders communicate with you guys?
Nathan, how would they find you?
How would they find me? At Pastor Nathan S is my Instagram, and I believe I'm looking it up. I don't even know what my Facebook one is. Or if they'd like to email me directly, they could email me at nsmith@fbcroswell.org. But yeah, look up First Baptist Church Roswell, and not Georgia, but New Mexico, and you should be able to find me there. And I love being able to care about kids. I love being able to care about youth pastors. It's something that's a big deal to me.
So Instagram is at Pastor Nathan S.
Yes, sir.
Oh, got it. Cool. Doug.
Yeah, for me, actually just my name, Doug Holliday. You'll find that at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So I got on all of those early enough that I actually own my own name. So
There you go.
so I can be found there. Sonlife can be found as well on those various platforms. So
great. I really encourage you guys, get to know Nathan, get to know Doug, get to know Sonlife. It is a deep, deep honor. These are two really good friends, and I am so grateful for you, Doug, and you, Nathan, for all you do for the kingdom. And as we wrap up here, I just want to remind youth leaders, spread the word about this, and remember that a thriving youth ministry is a gospel-advancing, disciple-multiplying youth ministry.